I am not going to do too much of an introduction in this video. As the title and the thumbnail both tell you, this is a compilation of some of my favorite films at Cannes this year. Let's get into it. Hey, if you're watching this channel for the first time, my name is Sucharita. I am a film critic and independent journalist of sorts, I suppose, and this was my 4th year attending the Cannes Film Festival in France. I watched a total of 20 films while also recording interviews with filmmakers, actors. All the interview coverage was being uploaded on this very channel in real time from Cannes. Now that I've had a moment to reflect on the films I watched, let's talk about my favorites, some special mentions, and those I didn't really care for. Number 1, La Bola Negra, or The Black Ball. This Spanish language film was the last title I saw at the festival this year, but I'm starting this list with La Bola Negra because this was hands down my favorite film this year. Yeah, the last one I watched over 12 days. One day when I'm on the jury at Cannes, I will mention in my speech that sure, the Best Director award for this film, Javier Calvo and Javier Ambrosé, was great, but a great injustice was carried out in 2026, not awarding them the Palme d'Or. I think so. So, this story spans over 2 generations of real men and 1 generation before them fictional. We start in 1937. A small Spanish village prepares to welcome Mussolini's men with celebration and music. But instead of embraces and festivity, planes fly overhead, showering the congregation with bullets. A young man abandons his trumpet and flees the scene. He is later picked up by fascist soldiers and inducted into their ranks, turning this musician into a killer. This is Sebastian, who now on his own journey may or may not realize the harm his erroneous beliefs can bring to people, but does figure out his romantic preference for men when he falls in love with a prisoner of war. The second timeline takes place in 2017, centering a man who has the freedom to be gay in the modern world. These 2 stories are connected, among other things, through an unfinished play written by real-life writer Federico Garcia Lorca. The play is believed to have been lost in 1936. Now embellished by directors Calvo and Ambrosi, the story of this imaginary play makes the 3rd timeline. This one is set in 1932 and talks of another gay character, this time a young boy who's not allowed to gain membership of an elite gentlemen's club on suspicion of his homosexuality. I know, this sounds like a lot, and frankly, at 2.5 hours for some viewers, it might even be. But thanks to a fantastic screenplay co-written with Alberto Conejero, the sprawling and weighty stories intertwine and entertain just enough to keep you hopelessly hooked to the tragedy of all these lives. How do you tell the story of death and fascism and murder of intellectuals and lovers in interesting ways that don't feel preachy? By introducing a song and dance sequence, by hiring Penelope Cruz and Glenn Close, by setting an entire imaginary sequence about death on a snowy mountaintop. While imagining what this lost play might have looked like, the directors give this film connective tissue that is just as brittle as it is Teflon. A story of class divide, expression, of love and untimely death. It could feel heavy-handed, but if done right and with the correct amount of painful, bleeding honesty, it can also pierce your heart in beautiful ways. And it can also teach you trivia on the origins of the term blackballing. That's cool. It's happening! It's happening! Can't miasma. Alright, up next on number 2 is Jane Schoenbrun's Teenage Death and Sex at Camp Miasma, which won the Queer Palm. Yep, lots of gay stories this year. It was awesome. Now, this one was the very first film I watched at the festival this year, and I'm very glad I chose 2 fantastic titles to bookend my Cannes experience. If you watch my interview with Anurag Kashyap, I think it should pop up right here. You'll hear both of us fawning over this utterly terrific film. I love a film about films. I love it even more if the film about films is calling out and having fun at the expense of films that have come before it. Jane Schoenbrun, who's been an AD, a writer, an executive, all in the world of cinema, has seen the shortcomings of various pop culture universes very closely, and they have made it a point to include all of these in all 3 of their feature films. From video games to TV and now to film, every single work of theirs celebrates and critiques the medium it's talking about with very brutal honesty, loads of comedy, and the occasional heavy-handedness also. Teenage Sex and Death at Camp Miasma is a campy film set at a camp. We start in 1990s, a new exploitation slasher film Camp Miasma is all the rage, spawning innumerable sequels, merchandise, rapidly turning from cultural phenomenon to a capitalist money-making tool. Within one wonderfully cheesy on-the-nose montage, we are told this film now, 30 years later, is considered problematic. By the time we arrive in modern day, the original male-gazy film, inspired by serial killer Ed Gein, leaning heavily on flesh and fluids, is getting yet another reboot, except this time the director is a queer woman. You see, we live in woke times now. It's a woke world. The director is Chris, played by Hannah Einbinder, and she's foremost a giant cinema nerd, but also the biggest fan of Camp Miasma's original actress Billy Preston, played by the very, very sexy Gillian Anderson. Like a modern-day Miss Havisham, Billy has continued to live on the actual campsite where the original film was shot in the 80s. She lives here alone, but dresses up like a movie star every day, especially when Chris shows up. As her old-timey projector plays the original film the night these two characters meet, Billy emerges from the shadows, ready to consume, but also perhaps secretly hoping to be rescued. She says, "If it gets too real, you can always turn it off," talking about slasher films, but alluding maybe to her own desire to end the misery of being associated with one thing her whole life, wanting an escape. Just too proud to ask? Anything I say about this bizarre film with blood fountains and underwater gender non-conforming hazmat suit wearing monsters is both wrong and right. Hollywood agents who literally say, "Hail Satan," show up. Clueless corporate suits talk using the most grating keywords in high-pitched voices. And goosebumps-level cheesy backstories all contribute to this utterly bonkers film, which I truly believe a director like India's Vasan Bala would have made if he was allowed to let himself run loose with studio money. By the time reality merges into film and film to the supernatural, Jane Schoenbrunn has you by the collar, throwing in the periodic blood fountain, asking you through the screen over and over, "You want more? You want more, you sick fuck?" Coming in close on number 3, yet another winner this festival, this time the jury prize recipient in the A Certain Regard category, Abhinash Bikram Shah's devastatingly beautiful film from Nepal, Elephants in the Fog. Before we proceed though, if you have early access to this video, I must thank you for being a channel member and supporting this truly independent, fully independent work. And if you're watching after this video has been made public, well, thanks for watching, but consider becoming a channel member, please. Times are tough for film critics right now, as you may imagine, and every little bit goes a long way. Elephants in the Fog is the first feature film from Nepal to make it to Cannes. Before this, a short in 2022, Lori had entered the race for the Short Film Palme d'Or and had won a special distinction award. The writer-director of that film, also Abhinash Bikram Shah. Elephants in the Fog tells you the story of Pirati. Pirati is played by Pushpa Singh Lama, who as a kinnar, which may be translated to trans woman, lives in a commune of sorts with other kinnar women. They are members of a very close-knit community that prays together, celebrates festivals together, and also practices their crafts of singing and dancing. The community is welcoming of women who've been rejected from their families, and together they survive on income earned from performing at various happy occasions in the village. When a younger woman from this community, Pirati's adopted daughter Apsara, played by Alice Gimire, goes missing, the women rapidly realize that the community that they had spent years building around them might just be a house of cards. This film, shot beautifully by French DOP Novak, uses the threat of wild elephants in the neighboring forest as a multi-layered metaphor. The gentle but mighty creature for centuries has been known to be an asset to humankind, but when hurt, can also be deadly. The women in this film also walk this tightrope. Pirati doesn't want to create trouble or even raise her voice. Ideals of grace, dignity, and royalty are taught to her by her guruma. But like the mighty elephant in a matriarchal society, Pirati longs for both people and self-determination and isn't sure that all the sacrosanct rules are actually worth following. Abhinash poses questions about various hierarchies in the society. Pirati prays that a pregnant woman have a son and not a daughter. But is that because she thinks men are better or because she knows they have it better? In places where law and order is not equal for all, is it okay to use whatever means one has at their disposal to make it work instead of just protest? When traditions refuse to evolve with time, can art take on new forms, or is it disrespectful to dance to a different kind of music, quite literally in this film? Is shunning society and moving back into the wilderness the only way to escape a capitalist patriarchal world? Oh, you must keep this astonishing film on your radar and come back to this video to comment when that final climax sequence completely shatters your heart. I'll be waiting.
길한복판에 죽어있냐 저거?
Up next, and at this point, I'm going to abandon my ranking system now that we're done with my top 3, alright? Let's talk about the absurd, supernatural action comedy from South Korea, Hope by Na Jin. The more I thought about this film, the more I fell in love with how utterly bizarre the whole thing was. Did I really see a monster tear through a seemingly abandoned little town, wiping tears off her face through her luscious black hair, looking for an alien baby? Is that other blue alien Alicia Vikander? Did that guy telling the story about a creepy crawly creature include a detail where he used his own finger as a plug to stop himself from taking a dump in the forest so he won't be heard? What decade is this film even taking place in? Competing for the Palme d'Or, this wild and breathless film felt like a fever dream. The writing uses really every single trope in the creature feature book, including terrible CGI one can see in a quickly produced B-grade exploitation movie. The marvel, though, lies in how all of it is stitched together to make a whole. You're hardly ever able to guess what the next sequence is going to bring, a tone the film wonderfully, miraculously keeps up right until a hilarious mid-credit scene. The first hour of Hope is unlike anything I've seen before. There seems to be an unknown force in this film that's ripping through a small town, mercilessly killing people and animals alike, breaking buildings, destroying cars, setting fires. By the time the police chief, played by Wang Jung-min, realizes what's going on and how might one deal with this impossible and ridiculous situation, the odds are stacked so hopelessly high against him, the random, unexpected slapstick comedic moments become the only way this story can proceed without feeling like a preachy superhero saves the world movie. My gosh, Hope is an incredibly fascinating work because without a build-up or a plot, a traditionally entertaining action film shouldn't work. Na Jin, though, goes forward and uses every last tool available in the movie magic toolbox to make the experience worth your while. None of it makes sense, by the way, but you absolutely cannot stop watching. When Jung Ho-yeon, whom you will recognize from Squid Game, when she shows up as Sang-ye, who's a cop, but also maybe a medical professional, the film gets faster and funnier. What if creature features, zombie movies, apocalyptic thrillers, horror flicks, they all had the awareness to recognize how foolish some of it can be, and they leaned into it, pressing on hard enough to come out the other side and then get in on the joke. It's a pretty good companion piece to Teenage Sex and Death at Camp Miasma, I thought. Before I start talking about the Adam Driver, Scarlett Johansson, Miles Teller star of Paper Tiger, here is a reminder to click that subscribe button under this video. Just touch it in case you haven't yet. If this channel grows, I can continue to bring you more from more festivals. Filmmaker James Gray returned to try and win the Palme d'Or at Cannes for the 6th time this year with Paper Tiger. 6 times. The first thing you see on the screen in this film are the words, "Let there be wealth without tears. Enough for the wise man who will ask no further." This, of course, sets the mood, announcing that this is going to be like a Greek tragedy about greed and family, and maybe even a question on what it means to be wise. It also does the job of simplifying the film right away, and sure enough, what James Gray then proceeds to present is a captivating but very accessible drama about a small family ripped apart due to, well, greed and the inability to understand what it means to be wise. Set in New York City of 1986, Adam Driver in this film is Gary. His younger brother Irvin is played by Miles Teller, who to me looks either 17 or 57 on any given day TBH. Here, Miles Teller is Irvin, the father of 2 young boys, and he's married to Hester, played by Scarlett Johansson. Everyone looks up to the ex-cop and now small business owner, Gary, who shows up periodically to their home in fancy cars, with fancy food, and a fancy concealed gun. Gary, through his many charming ways, it's Adam Driver after all, and means convinces Irvin to join him in a development project in the city where they will have to deal with some shady and perhaps illegally operating Russian business owners. Irvin, entirely unlike his brother, is a very straight-laced, simple man. So, of course, almost immediately, he's in over his head. A major problem arises instantly when Irvin witnesses some nefarious activities, and now both him and his family are in danger. Paper Tiger is an extremely watchable vintage-style thriller. The screenplay is very engaging. It includes a minor or major incident written into each scene, making escape harder and harder for Irvin as it goes along. Through Gary, Gray questions what it means to be a man and how claims of "I got this" from dudes with a god complex rarely end well, regardless of their moral and ethical leanings. Gary calls the Russian businessmen paper tigers, an irony that is not lost on the viewer, who can see Gary's own downfall rapidly approaching even when he can't see it himself. Adam Driver and Miles Teller together are really quite fantastic, each bringing their own version of paranoia to enhance the tension in this very taut script. I will say here though, I wish there was more for Scarlett Johansson and her character to do in the story beyond, she's the mother with all the warnings, and there's 2 scenes of big emotional breakdowns, and there's one subplot that doesn't quite belong. The actor, who did not attend the festival this year, doesn't have a whole lot to offer beyond the ever so slightly stereotypical characterization that's handed to her. Up next, I am including a documentary on this list, Once Upon a Time in Harlem by William Greaves and David Greaves, a deeply educational film equivalent to a transformative college lecture on the modern history of America. This documentary was shot by filmmaker William Greaves during a single cocktail party in August 1972, which he organized at the home of pianist and composer Duke Ellington. Gathered at the party were surviving African-American members of the cultural and intellectual Harlem Renaissance movement, which amassed most interest and participation in the 1920s, 100 years ago. So over the course of this 1972 evening, Greaves deploys 3 cameras to observe ongoing conversations unfolding in different rooms in this house between photographers, socialists, politicians, artists, historians, librarians, and composers, all Black artists who helped shape culture and public discourse in America as we now know it. William Greaves, a prolific documentary filmmaker, died in 2014 without completing what he described as the most important work of his life. His son David and granddaughter Leonie continued the restoration of the 16mm footage from that evening. Hours and hours of material over 50 years after it was originally shot, this film was made. The editing and splicing together of this footage is phenomenal. Countless moments tell you important truths about the era, the Back to Africa movement, the role of public libraries and the free knowledge they provide, how some Black artists originally had to perform in racist minstrel shows, a gangster who was also a philanthropist, what was FDR's Black cabinet, and how the eventual decline of the movement happened due to lack of funding and other reasons. Yet, despite the historical setting, the construction of this documentary is strikingly contemporary. When one participant says, "Without hindsight, there's no foresight," and another reflects that art comes out of community and it comes out of audaciousness. These conversational moments, they feel almost retrofitted to speak directly to young people in the arts today, guiding you back toward art and original thought, away from political distraction and the noise of the internet. And they do it all while reminding you to enjoy life and have fun with your friends. Even when the camera cuts away from the party to include talking head interviews shot in adjacent rooms, seemingly on that same August evening in 1972, you can still sense that there's a party continuing in the background of these talking heads. It's waiting for you to return. Each of these luminaries then keeps bringing up parts of the Renaissance that felt most important to them: music, aviation, journalism, acting, or the role played by women. Watching this film makes it very evident how modern movements in the USA centered around cultural identity, how they rest on the shoulders of African-American artists and activists who refused to disappear, leaving you so grateful that they existed in defiance. And considering that almost all of the people featured in this film are now deceased, this documentary carries a supernatural feeling. It's like watching angels discuss how to create a guidebook to life under fascism while partying together in some parallel dimension. Here's the key to the resistance. I'm going to take a moment here and add a very special Relation Me recommendation. Look up the poem "If We Must Die," written by Claude McKay in 1919, which I learned about through this film. I read the poem later. The title immediately sent a chill down my spine because it made me think of Palestinian poet Rifat Al-Hariri's poem "If I Must Die," which gained worldwide attention in 2023 after he was killed in an Israeli airstrike during the ongoing genocide in Gaza. If you haven't, please read that one too. Alright, I'm about to move on to the next section of this very long video, some special mentions, films I liked quite a bit. These are not reviews now, they're just mentions. So don't get all upset if I don't go into too much detail, okay? First up is another documentary. This one is called The Story of Documentary, and it is by Mark Cousins. At this festival at Cannes, they screened 2 chapters out of the 16 in this entire series that covers the length and breadth of the world of documentary films as filmmaker extraordinaire Mark Cousins travels the world. The film is still doing festival rounds, but if you're unfamiliar with Cousins' work, I'd strongly recommend looking up The Story of Film and Odyssey. Next mention is Asghar Farhadi's Parallel Tales. Isabelle Huppert is Sylvie, an aging author who lives by herself in Paris. She's looking for an inspiration for her next story and begins to keenly and rather creepily observe the residents of the building across the street from her. A clock is ticking, though. If Sylvie doesn't hurry up with the writing and finish the story, she may not be able to finish it at all, as her niece, who also co-owns this flat, is planning to sell it. As Sylvie's obsession grows, you learn why the 2 apartments that she has chosen to spy on are of special importance to her. There's a young homeless man who's been hired to help her pack up her belongings, and he inadvertently gets involved in the whole situation. Many lines are crossed, and after a point, it kind of becomes difficult to decipher which part of the story we're watching is real and what details has Sylvie simply cooked up in her head. I really liked this film. A whole lot more than most critics seemed to have at Cannes. It was pretty divisive. I thought it was captivating, funny, and very sad. Pivotal characters play Foley artists, which I thought was a fab choice. Do you know, this film reminded me of Ritesh Batra's Lunchbox if it crossed over a little bit with Hitchcock's The Rear Window. Next on my special mentions list, Fatherland by Paweł Pawlowski, who also won Best Director at the festival, an award he shared with the directors of La Bola Negra. Set in 1949, starring the amazing Sandra Hüller along with Hans Ziesler, Fatherland tells the story of the life of German writer Paul Thomas Mann. Now, this was the shortest film I watched at this festival, sticking to a merciful 82 minutes runtime. Thank you. But despite, once again being set in the 40s, this film also is very much of this time. The focus is the appropriation of art and culture by fascist regimes, a topic that is as relevant today as it can be. In one fantastic scene, Sandra Hüller engages in conversation with her ex-husband at an event. He's a handsome man. You find out he's an actor who is aligned with the Nazi party. He made propaganda films, and now, after Hitler's death, has somehow managed to come out unscathed, unbothered even. This scene ends with Hüller delivering a full slap to his face, a comeuppance that she delivers personally, even though the system has decided to forgive him. Like I said, it's set 80 years in the past, but it feels so current. The entire film is in black and white, striking imagery, really. The more I read about the Mann family, the more I want to watch this film again and more closely this time. Maybe I will and review it later. Before I move on to 3 more very quick special mentions and one film that won a major award but I can't talk about because I fell asleep. Here's another reminder once again to subscribe to this channel if you're enjoying this very long list. Alright, so the next 3 mentions are the opening night film, The Electric Kiss, also called La Venus Electrique by Pierre Salvadori, Minotaur by Russian filmmaker Andrei Zvagintsev. I'm so sorry. That film won the Grand Prix, and of course, Fjord by Christian Mungiu that won this year's Palme d'Or. Did I think these last 2 films were the best 2 films in competition this year at the festival? Probably not. Do I absolutely love Renata Rentsua? Yeah, resounding. Yes, I met her. She's amazing. Minotaur is a remake of a 1969 film, The Unfaithful Wife, which was also remade in 2002 as Unfaithful, starring Richard Gere, in case you remember. And Fjord is the remake of Mrs. Chatterjee versus Norway. It's not. I'm kidding. I'm joking. It is just a very similar story set in Norway of Norwegian authorities taking away children of immigrants under child abuse allegations, which may or may not be real. Similar stories. Not a remake. Up next, I've got the Did Not Work For Me list, just titles. I will include, though, before that, one more special mention here. Notre Salut. That's also called A Man of Its Time, and it's by French filmmaker Emmanuel Mar. Notre Salut is set around the same time as Fatherland, also telling the story of a real person. Emmanuel Mar created this best screenplay winning work from the letters his great-grandfather and great-grandmother exchanged with each other during a period of turmoil in the early 40s France. Cannes also awarded Notre Salut's editor, Nicolas Rumpel, its Best Artist/Technician award this year. I interviewed the film's director Mar and lead actor Swan Arlo at the festival, and we spoke about how the screenplay was created, why it is important for the youth to pay attention to politics, and what it means to tell this very personal story. You should see a pop-up right here, or there will be a link in the description of this video to get to that interview. Oh yeah, I almost forgot the film I will not be talking about because I fully fell asleep was Lucas Dont's Coward. It's not his fault. I just chose to watch the 10:30 p.m. show and I was very tired. The two leads won Best Actor for the film, so it's on my radar, just not today. And lastly, I can't believe we've reached this point. A list of films I did not care for. If any of these seem like disappointing choices to you, well, come fight me in the comments. First up, Steven Soderbergh's John Lennon, The Last Interview. Heavy generative AI use, nothing new to say, no insights or introspection. Pedro Almodovar's Amarga Navidad or Bitter Christmas. Hirokazu Korida's Sheep in the Box. And Nicholas Winding Refn's Her Private Hell. This film almost reminded me of Michael Scott's fake film in The Office, Threat Level Midnight. Just didn't work for me. And that finally brings me to the end of the list of films, the good, bad, and AI of it all. I don't know how many people will view this video, what reach or engagement it may get, but if you've arrived at this point here, thank you for watching so far. Thank you for being a channel member if you got early access. And thank you for subscribing to the channel because there is just there's no way you watched me speak 5,000 words out loud, the length of a whole chapter in a book, and you refuse to click subscribe. I mean, come on. I'm also working on another long video from the festival which will sort of cover the entire experience from getting there, booking tickets, getting interviews, watching films, walking around, moving between apartments, shooting for sponsors. My husband shows up in that one. It is a pretty big undertaking, something I've not done before, hence it's going to take just a little bit of time to get it right. Watch this space for more. As always, my name is Sucharita. Thank you for stopping by.